A very pleasant good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Magandang umaga po, magandang tanghali, magandang hapon sa inyong lahat. Wherever you're located and whatever your time zone is, we'd like to welcome you to our Chronicles. Over the past so many years, we've come across many things that affect our lives. And of course, politics is one of those that is actually weaving in and out, not just in the social strata, but also even in the intimacy of family homes. But that's not what we're going to talk about. We'll talk about everything under the sun. And of course, my partner and regular guest has always been that kind of a person who is thinking out of the box. He is one of those that can give us a wide view of the universe and could go into a microscopic view of the way things are. So I'd like to welcome one of the finest minds this part of our country and perhaps this part of the planet, my good friend Bono ADAZA. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, good morning, and what else? And good night. Good evening. No, not
And
good
good
night.
evening,
It should be
yes.
good evening.
Exactly.
Rita, it's a pleasure to be with you always.
Yes.
And I like the title. I've seen the movie. The Good, Bad, and the Ugly.
Yes. But this I inverted it.
Yeah, and it reminds me the bad, the ugly, and the good.
Yes.
For me, the bad is the national situation. The ugly is Philippine politics. And the good is our dreams of tomorrow.
Very well said, Bono. That's exactly why I had to invert the good, the bad, and the ugly, which has become a colloquial term actually. You remember the movie. I'm sure that many of our age would remember that. But for the young people, maybe they would still have some of the old movies where you have Clint Eastwood, and then you had Lee Van Cleef, and then you had Eli Wallach. They were very good, exceptionally good professional movie actors. And that was the title of their movie, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And it's always been some kind of an expression every time people talk, etc. It's already a colloquial phrase. But for this afternoon, as Bono was saying, the world is filled with many things that we seem to consider as already ugly. We don't understand things that are happening, but it is there. Maybe we understand a little of it, but somehow it is still difficult to explain. For instance, Bono has been asking that we should change our introductory music. This is Mozart, the Turkish March. I was tempted to do that, Bono, but something is happening in the Middle East. And if we go to that particular region of our planet, then you could realize that thousands of years ago, even before the pyramids were constructed, you already had Babylonia, Mesopotamia. And then after that, you had the coming of the Turks, which were not called the Turks at the time, but that was already the beginning of the Islamic civilization also. But nonetheless, perhaps it is also timing that our intro music is precisely that, to remind us of something ugly that's happening out there. You had last October 7, Bono, the attack of this terrorist group, the Hamas, against Israel. And then, of course, the retaliation after that, which continues to this day. That's the ugly. And it is also bad in that situation. So, Bono, that is something that perhaps we cannot fully discuss, we cannot fully understand, and we can just use that word, it is ugly and it is bad.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you there because I'm glued to the many television programs on a day-to-day basis on what's happening in Hamas, no? in the Middle
Israel,
East.
in Israel.
And what interests me are the speeches I've listened to of Benjamin Netanyahu and Hassan Youssef, son of the founder and one of the commanders of Hamas. Beautiful. Beautiful.
Which is beautiful. Both speeches?
Yes, it's in YouTube. It's in
Okay.
YouTube. And they present the situation very well in the Middle East. No? Contrary to propaganda coming from various places. But these guys, Benjamin Netanyahu, he's on his 8th term, by the way, as Prime Minister of Israel. And Youssef, who has been delivering speeches for 20 years all over the world, saying that Hamas is an evil force in this planet. It's no different from ISIS, from Al-Qaeda, from Muslim Jihad, because they are not the good representation of Islam. They are the bad and ugly representation of Islam, as he said. In his case, he said, you know, I was leading a very luxurious life as son of the founder and commander of Hamas. But after a while, I was looking around and I don't like what I see and what's happening. That's why he left. No? He left and went to Israel and became a Christian. He did not become a Jew. Huh? He became a Christian. He became a Christian, and his presentation about what's happening in the world is so beautiful. I think everybody should see it. Everybody should see the speech when he was a young man and 20 years later today, no? Because it's very impressive, no? Very impressive. Passionate, highly intellectual, beautiful analysis. I'm entranced listening to speech because I love speeches, and also Netanyahu. No, if I were a leader of a country, one of my examples will be Benjamin Netanyahu. No, for focus, for determination, and for having a vision. You know, what I like, what that I like very much is his portion in saying this. Rome and Greece are no longer here, but the small country that's Israel is still here. We have fought wars. They wanted to erase us from the face of this planet, but we fought back and we're still here. That's why I love these guys, no? Netanyahu and Youssef.
So you have here two personalities.
Yes.
Personifying exactly in a way what is happening in Israel. And then you have definitions that are actually coming out. According to the son of the leader of Hamas, he was enticed by that group until he realized that he had to get out of it because it eventually evolved into something like a terrorist group. And that's exactly, I think, what disturbs a lot of people, because some time back when we had Yasser Arafat organizing the Palestinian Liberation Organization, it took many years for them to really get together and come out with some kind of an agreement together with the Jews on what to do with Israel, with the Israelites, and with the Palestinians. So that was when the idea of having two governments, one for the Palestinian and the other for the Israelites, so that there will be no longer that conflict of trying to have one over the other. And it was the terrorist group, the Hezbollah and the Hamas, that actually objected to this. That's why hindi natuloy. Because that was already, would have been the ideal. Nowadays, a lot of people are talking about this, that they will not be able to live together, but perhaps if they have two states in just one country, perhaps it could still work, but we don't know. It is just a supposition. Be that as it may, the sad part about it, Bono, and that's the ugly part about it, um, two different mindsets
Right.
and two different religions and two different governments in a way, even though Israel is run by the Jews, you still have that West Bank and the Gaza Strip, which is actually occupied by the Palestinians. As Yasser Arafat so graphically described it when, remember, they met in Camp David,
Yes, yes.
and that there would have been an agreement at the time, and he was saying, we are all Palestinians in a way. You are a Palestinian Jew, I am a Palestinian Arab, but this is Palestine. You know, that was, it became Israel in 1948, but that
Right.
was Palestine in ancient times. So that could have been the threshold for an understanding between these two cultures, these two religions, these two governments, so to speak. But it didn't happen. In fact, Yasser Arafat was even given observer status in the United Nations. And there was relative peace, while the idea of having two separate states was actually being discussed. But then, of course, many things have happened since then, and that is a situation we have right now. It is ugly, and the way things are going, it is also bad, because here we have already the victims, which are the civilians, citizens, and who have nothing to do with the ideological or religious or political fight between the leaders, and they're the ones that are actually victimized. So
Yeah.
that's the bad and the ugly.
In war, Rita, there is always collateral damage. And the collateral damage is the civilians. Because while one of the best armies in the world, and admitted by many experts, not only in America but in many other places, is the Israeli army. No matter how expert you are in the use of weapons, sometimes it misfires. And, the problem is in the Middle East, the civilians are used as human shields, even hospitals. Under the hospitals are the headquarters of Hamas, by God. So I'm sorry that there's a lot of collateral damage, but I do not agree with the UN resolution and Antonio Gutierrez. There's a lot of hypocrisy there. You know why? What did they do when the Rohingya were on the run in Myanmar? Did they do anything? What did they do in Sri Lanka when the Indians were on the run? Did they do anything? What are they doing in the Philippines when we won in the arbitral tribunal, and we are being subjected to terrorism in the West Philippines? And the latest is cannons.
Water cannons.
Water cannons. But
before
it's
we
so
go,
sad.
yeah, before we go jump to all of that, many areas of conflict in the world, Bono. You were mentioning what is happening there in the Middle East. There is still something ongoing in Ukraine, and there you have also the conflict between Russia and what's his name, Zelensky. And
Yes.
so you have and then you have the alliances also in the Middle East. Some of the Arab countries are also refuge, are also part of the refuge of the terrorists or whatever groups there are.
Yes.
So you have Iran, then you have Yemen, and then we don't
Syria.
know. Yeah, exactly, Syria. You were mentioning the resolution of the United Nations. I also do not. I'm very uncomfortable, likewise, with that kind of a resolution. But then again, we have had so many other wars. I mean, like Afghanistan. So how
Right.
many decades? And then they leave Afghanistan, it's a complete wreck. Libya, there was absolutely no reason to remove Gaddafi.
I agree.
Yeah, absolutely no reason to remove. And look at Libya, my goodness. It has completely deteriorated. Afghanistan, there are still people there that are wanting to get out. You have the Taliban taking over, and nothing has been done by way of assuaging the civilians, so to speak. So that is the sad part about Syria. Remember the ISIS and how
Right.
for so many years we were terrorized because of this ISIS, and even some of their some of them even entered Marawi here to establish the caliphate, so to speak, wherever they're able to do so. But what happened? Syria was at the mercy of this ISIS, the Daesh, as they would call it. And that's the sad part about that's the ugly part of it. There is no distinction now what is good and what is bad.
You
So
know,
that
Rita,
yeah.
these people in the Arab world should learn from us in the Philippines, especially in Mindanao. You and I have lived with Muslims all our lives. Some of my best friends until now are Muslims. We live together. So why the hell is there fighting on religion? The best religion is the religion that makes a person good and is a credit not only to his community, to his country, but to mankind. That's the purpose of religion, making the human being a good person. And there's no sense fighting. As a matter of fact, when I was a kid, I used to listen to debates of various religious sectors in Camiguin and in Cagayan City. I was wondering, what kind of badness is this? Each one claiming to be the best religion. And I had an opportunity to talk with him. I don't like to mention the religious sect. And he was telling me, we have the best religion in this country. Oh, really? We have very good relations. Oh, why is it that the leadership of your religion is quarreling? Why? Yeah, you're quarreling over money. You see? He was telling me. So I told him, let's stop discussing about the best religion, because the best religion, the good religion, is the religion that makes a human being a good person. That's the good religion. Anything that departs from that is not good. It's bad and ugly. That's what's happening in the Middle East.
Yeah, you were mentioning how our lives have been, and continues to be the way
Yes.
we live with our Muslim brothers. We were really part of many of them. We were part of their families too in many ways. My father was a surgeon, and our Muslim families, brothers and sisters, would come to the clinic of my father for surgery. Their wives gave birth there, whether it is natural birth or a cesarean section. Their appendix were removed by my father. Their sons were circumcised by my father. There was no problem as to designating whether you are Muslim or Christian. We were living well. What happened was when politics became had an ugly face and came in to disrupt many of these relationships, because you will realize, Bono, that our life there under, like Cotabato, for instance, where I'm from, was just the biggest province in the country. Now it is 4 provinces.
Yeah.
But we were ruled like a feudal. It was feudal in the sense you had the datu, who was of royal blood, and that's it. Only those with royal blood could ascend into the hierarchy of being the leaders. But politics came in such a way that there was already a claim for other positions, and etc. And that, I think, is what is ugly.
Yeah.
If it cannot really be something that is good for all, as you said, them, it disrupts the harmony. And that's exactly what happened to many of our situations in the South. Of course, you mentioned something about, well, Hamas and the Hezbollah and the extremists. The Mindanao independence movement, remember how it began with Hashim Salamat.
Yes.
He actually got exposed when he was studying in Egypt. He got exposed to the Palestinian liberation movement. And there he realized that you could ask for independence within the state that you're living in. See? So when he came back, he began to, because he was already on the higher level of the religious group, he was already an imam, parang sa Catholic hierarchy, parang bishop na yan, or cardinal na, or whatever. But he was still peasant. So he could not get into, as I said, because it's still feudalistic, he could not get into positions of power. But the power he had was the power that he brought with him in his mind, which was the idea of being able to secede from the state where you're living in, the way the Palestinians also were demanding that they have their own state. That's why you had the PLO at the time. So that is where the independence movement in our place, Bono, began. But politics came in. So
Yeah.
that's the sad part about it. Ginamit na yung movement, not for the benefit of the people as a whole, but for the division of the spoils. So
you
if
know,
you wanted to rule a certain place, then you had to be connected to the powers that be, and that's how. Well, that's the ugly part of it. Anyway.
you know, Rita, I'll give you two personal experiences in relation to Muslim-Christian relation. When I was editor-in-chief of the Philippine Collegian in UP, I got threatened by members of the fraternity, by leaders of fraternities in UP, because I was in non-frat. And I was only 92 pounds. So when the Mindanaoans learned about it, by God, the ones who defended me were Muslims. I still remember their names. Vincent Ciro, Darwish Yusa, and Alvin Tan. So many of them defended me, and they looked for this guy who threatened me, and they confronted them. I said, why do you have to threaten ADAZA? He's only 92 pounds. You just blow him and he will fall. You threaten us. So we had peace because of the intervention of our Muslim brothers. When I was also in the Batasang, the major leaders of the Muslim communities were Salipada Pindatun, very colorful. And then Ali Di Mapuro. They were the major leaders of the KBL. But when I was debating already for the impeachment of President Marcos, secretly, they came to me, Bono, do what you're doing. Do good, because when you become the leader, we will be your followers. And with respect to the Mindanao independence movement, you know, Ruben took over. Ruben Canoy took over. Yeah, took over from Hashim Salamat. He was perceived as one of the three major leaders of Mindanao Alliance, though he actually was not a member. He was a member of parliament because I conscripted him to be with Mindanao Alliance. And Ruben one day was asking me, the leaders of Mindanao, of the independence movement, were asking me, you know, we raised the flag, according to them, Mayor Sabio, we raised the flag of Mindanao in Bukidnon. And what happened? We got charged. We got charged. I said, why? Where's Ruben? Ruben is in Florida. He's not here. So why do you come to see me? Why don't you assume leadership of the Mindanao independence movement? So I said, you know, Mayor and the rest of the gang, they were also mayors. I cannot do that. I had to ask permission from Ruben because Ruben is my friend. To accept your offer without my talking with Ruben is an insult to friendship. I cannot do that. I cannot do that. When Ruben came back, he asked me, Bono, Bon, will you join us? I go, Ben, do you have money? No. Do you have international contacts? No. You first have international contacts and you have money. That's the time you should move for independence because these are the basic elements for independence. It's not enough to have a charismatic leader.
Exactly.
That's
very
not
true.
enough.
Yeah, that's also how it was, with Hashim Salamat and the movement that he started. Because at the time, as early as that time, when there appeared to be an impossibility that his movement would be granted anywhere politically. So there was already the idea of the federal form of government
Right.
precisely at the time. You must remember that the first Bailey Bridge that was exploded was in 1965 when the MIM began. Just for the benefit of those who are listening to us, baka hindi nyo alam kung ano yung Bailey Bridge. Yan yung mga steel matting na nakikita nyo na ginagawa ng mga pader na mga bahay kung meron pang natitira. They're so durable. They were the materials that were used for the bridges that we had. Wala pa kaming mga highways noon. We just had, well, parang one lane lang yung mga karsada. But yung mga tulay sa mga ilog were Bailey bridges. Andaling pasabugin. But anyway, going back to how it was. So even at that early stage, there was already the idea that independence will not be granted, even though they were demanding for this. But there will be some kind of an agreement if they could be granted a federal form. But what happened when I say that politics comes in? Ginamit kasi yung movement ng independence movement na yan for political gains. You were mentioning many of those past leaders that we had at the time. You had Salipada Pendatun Cotabato yan. He was congressman and then senator. And then you had Udtug Matalam, who was the governor. They were the Liberal Party leaders then in our place. And then in Lanao, you had Rashid Luman and Alonto. Liberal din yan. And then where you are, Cagayan de Oro, etc., you had, I think you had Kabili and sino pa ba?
No, Kabili is Iligan.
Yeah, Iligan. Sa Cagayan de Oro, who was the Muslim leader that you had there? Wala pa kasi sila Ampatuan, wala pa sila. They came much, much later. The Sinsuat also came after the Matalams and the Pendatuns. But what I'm trying to say is, the idea of having an independent state was shelved because it was used by the politicians to ask favors from the administration. You must remember at the time, Marcos was nationalista. Our leaders in Mindanao were liberals. And so you had the explosion of a bridge to start the movement of independence. So pinatawag sila ni Marcos. Ano bang nangyayari dyan? That's why they didn't even have a name yet. The MIM were called the Black Shirts because these were the soldiers, the military arm of Salamat. And then you had the counter movement against them from the military, and these were the mercenaries na rin. You call them the Ilaga, which is the rats, because remember, that was how they were called. I'm just trying to make a review of this for whatever it may be worth. This is historical in the sense that that was how it all began. And if we relate it to what is happening in the Middle East now with the Israelites and the Muslims, with the Palestinians and the Jews in Israel, parang nagkakaroon din ng, well, at the beginning, it would have been sana, as Arafat would have wanted, together with Ishtak Rabin and several other of the Jewish leaders, 2 states. And that was how it could have happened in our place, Bono, because then if we had a federal form of government, then the identity of those belonging to certain areas could have their own system of government.
Rita, if
Yeah.
we live long enough, there will be a federal system in this country.
We will live long enough, Bono.
Yeah, there
We
will be.
started this all the way back from 1965.
There will be a federal system. There will be a federal system.
1969, I went all over Cotabato also. You know, on the platform, whatever, all gatherings talking about a federal form. This was 1969 because there was
Yeah.
going to be a constitutional convention in 1970, remember?
Yeah.
And we were working even at the time, a year before the constitutional convention, we were already campaigning for a federal form of government. Ang tagal na, Bono, that was...
Federal
I have
system.
aged.
By the way, no, you have not aged. You still look
I have
young.
aged, you know.
You
Can you
look young.
imagine? You know, we did not have any roads getting to the towns of Milbuk, Palembang, Calamansig. These are the coastal towns in Cotabato. We had to go out into the Celebes Sea to be able to reach these towns. I would travel out into the Celebes Sea to reach memoryado ko yung bayan na yan because they're so historic for me. Imagine, parang lalabas ka ng Pilipinas out into the Celebes Sea to get to Milbuk, Calamansig, you know, and Lebac. And what was I doing there? I was talking about the federal form of government.
You know, Rita, when I founded Mindanao Alliance in 1979, my Secretary General was a Muslim, Ferdowsi Singh Abbas.
Yes, of course.
He was my Secretary General. And then in the elections of 84, we campaigned kasi region-wise ang election noon eh. During the interim Batasang election.
Yeah.
No, the regular Batasang elections, it was region-wide. So in our case, we campaigned in Region 10. Mindanao. We clobbered KBL in Region 10. We clobbered KBL in Region 11.
Yeah.
We won some seats in Region 9. The problem, we won the elections, but we lost the proclamation, except Ruben. Except Ruben Canoy.
You know, the group I was with, actually, yan. In 69, I predated you 10 years. Ikaw 79, ako 69. Kasama ko Sandiali Sambulawan of the Royal House of the Sambulawans.
I still remember him.
Yes, and then Korokoy Moson.
Oh.
And Musib Wat. And then Midpantaw Adil, who eventually became a regional trial court judge in Bacolod. He's the husband of the daughter, the first daughter of Udtug Matala.
He was a very good friend of mine.
Pantaw Adil, yes. Can you imagine?
Adel was a good friend.
Yeah,
he was a very good friend.
That was the group I had. Musibwat, you know, well, Alunan Glang wanted to join, but he was already a professor and he didn't leave. He didn't want to go to Mindanao anymore. But this is the group that I campaigned with for the federal form of government in 1969. Just as long as it could be included in the Constitutional Convention amendments, not amendments, for the new Constitution of 1970.
Yeah, you predated us by 10 years.
I predated you by 10 years.
In the campaign.
Yeah, and now, now they're also asking for a federal form. Ang dami na kasing dinaanan. Nagkaroon na ng regional autonomous government. You had Espaldon in your area, and then we had Dato Manong in the Cotabatos. And then you had, after that, you had the Bangsamoro something, and then you have the BARM now, etc. Ang dami ng dinaanan, only to come back to a federal form of government, which they're now demanding. Can you imagine that, Bono? The good, the bad, and the ugly. That is the good part about it, but the ugly and the bad somehow took over, you know, and we were not successful in pushing through with this. And as you said, yes, Bono, We intend to live long enough to have a federal form of government.
As Bobby Kennedy used to say, people see things as they are and ask why. I dream of things that never were and ask why not. Why not a federal system? Why not a parliamentary system? Why not the Philippines rename? Why not a new national anthem? Why not a new national language? You know, I'm preparing a book which I want to launch early next year, since there will be elections in 2025. No?
Yeah.
It's entitled New Horizons, a manual to build the country.
Wonderful.
Yeah. It's along the same lines as Kennedy, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Wilson, Ferdinand Adrian Marcos with his new society. Mine is just the New Horizon.
The New Horizons, yes. Yeah. Sometime during the formation of our Katipunan, yes, actually, that was already part of the ideals that Apolinario Mabini and then Andres Bonifacio, they also spoke of this. Yeah. The New Horizon, yes, indeed. And that is exactly the good.
That's the good.
We come out of this, the bad and the ugly.
Right.
We are actually having parallelisms, and the reason why Bono and I are discussing this with what is happening in the Middle East, where you have these two factions of the Jews and the Arabs, or the Muslims and the Jews, is not exactly, but it has parallel similarities with what we went through in Mindanao, which up to this day we are still trying to resolve. You see how it is. President Junior has been there and has talked to a lot of their leaders. More money is pouring in. Housing programs are supposed to be expedited. But Marawi has been what? How many years ago? And still, it needs further impetus to really rehabilitate it. Ganon din ang nangyari sa mga bansa na pinasukan din nitong mga terorista sa Middle East. Yung sinasabi nga natin sa Libya, sa Iran, sa Iraq, for instance.
Sa Yemen.
Yemen. Look what happened to Iraq. Pinasukan yan on a lie.
Oh.
On a lie. And you had the Chief of Staff of America screaming hysterically at the United Nations and demanding that they enter Iraq because there are weapons of mass destruction, when even the United Nations group of scientists and atomic scientists and all of this have been to Iraq, and they confirmed 3 visits, and they confirmed walang weapons of mass destruction, yet they entered Iraq, destroyed it completely, removed Saddam Hussein. My goodness. You see how it is. Yeah.
The weapon of mass destruction, insofar as the Western Alliance is concerned, is Saddam Hussein. He's the weapon of mass destruction because they could not dominate him.
No, they suspected that the bombing of the Twin Towers was coming from Iraq, when Bin Laden is from Saudi Arabia and was not hiding in Iraq, but was actually, where did they find him? They found him in Pakistan, right?
Of course.
He was not even in Afghanistan. And the Taliban was all over Afghanistan, and they thought he was there until they discovered, after the sleuthing of their intelligence, that he was actually in Pakistan. And that's why they entered Iraq, kasi akala nila andun si Bin Laden, and Bin Laden was part of that. You know, a long time ago, before they invaded Iraq, I had the chance to have a short dialogue, an interview, if you would call it, but really more of a conversation with Saddam Hussein himself. And his opening line was, "You're Christian, but we are brothers and sisters," he said, "because we have one father, Ibrahim." And then he spoke of Babylonia, Mesopotamia. "We are the mother of all civilizations, and the river that traverses your Genesis, the garden of your paradise, is here." He showed me the river, the Euphrates.
Yeah,
so
of course.
That was, and he even spoke of Kuwait at the time. He brought out a map and said, "Where is Kuwait here in this map?" it is not there because it is a province of our country. It is part of Kuwait. But the British got it and blocked us so that we cannot get out of Iraq without passing through Iraq and paying a toll just to be able to get out to the sea and bring our oil out there. So see what happened. He said that in 1977. When was the invasion of Kuwait? 1990, 91, 92.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, thereabouts. But even at the time, he already said, one day I shall get it back from the British, or at least from Kuwait, or whatever ruler they had at the time that they placed there. So you see how sometimes the ugly face of, do you call it neocolonialism, hegemony, whatever it is, comes in. It is still geopolitical. And that is precisely why we have the bad and the ugly before we can finally hope for the good, as you said, Bono. And that's the
Yes.
reason why we're relating the things that are happening in other parts of the world, which actually happened here in Marawi, and then which is happening now in Israel. So again, we are looking at this and seeing it both bad and ugly, and hope that some good will come out of it. As you said,
No,
Bono, there are no
the,
winners in the war.
the way I look at things in this country, I'm a positivist. I'm a perennial optimist. I believe that there'll be changes in this land. When? I don't know. That's only God knows when. Only God knows when. But there will be changes in this land. No? I'm doing a article in my column. No? I started with the first one on the statement of General Romeo Bronner about destabilization. So I'm trying to help re-educate this country about certain things in the Constitution. For instance, the military. No? Let me just explain this for a while. The military has an obligation under Section 3 of Article 2 of the Constitution. It says civilian authority is at all times supreme over the military. That's the rule. The exception is the armed forces of the Philippines is the protector of the people and the state. Its goal is to secure the sovereignty of the state and the integrity of the national territory. That's in the first part. I am telling them that they have a responsibility. You know, the problem with our country is that officials think that they are demigods. They are not. Under Section 1 of Article 2 of the Constitution, it says also that the Philippines is a democratic and republican state. Sovereignty resides in the people, and all government authority emanates from them. The president is not supreme. The Supreme Court is not supreme. The Congress is not supreme. The supreme authority in this country is the people, under Section 1 of Article 2. That's why all of us should be reminded of these things. The military, the police, the civilian government, and the citizen. The Constitution kasi is too long. Nobody bothers about these things. These are the fundamentals.
Exactly. We've been harping on that, Bono. You and I, about 10 years ago, and we had the program, remember? That's exactly what you were saying. The Constitution should be written simply, briefly, and with exactitude, and that's it. It's too verbose. And it has to have a language which we can memorize.
That's right.
Poetic enough for us to be proud of it when we recite it, so.
I'm preparing one. I'm preparing one which is simple, brief, and clear in meaning.
Exactly.
And along that line also, and a friend of mine way back when, who is now a radio program and a streaming program in Honolulu, Emmanuel Tipon. I think you know him, Al Tipon.
Yes.
And he was telling me, Bono.
He's the one with the with the mustache, right?
Yeah. Bono, we should promote Philippines, My Philippines as the national anthem. I said, yes, we will promote that but the way I've rewritten it is different. It's Mindanao. I love my native land, Mindanao, the promised land.
But let's get back to Browner. You mentioned something about I think he was misquoted according to him, or misinterpreted when he answered, or when he talked to some of the officials or members of the militaries. I think it was in Zamboanga, some place in Mindanao.
Yeah, in Zamboanga, Wiscom, in Zamboanga City.
Okay, so in Zamboanga.
No, he was not misquoted, Rita, because I was listening to him in
Okay.
YouTube.
So what exactly was it? Because
he was loose in his language. He was saying that there is destabilization move going on, and he has even talked with retired officers who were recruiting from the current officers and men of the armed forces of the Philippines, and he told them, you can do anything within the democratic space, but do not recruit among the officers and men of the armed forces. You know, high public officials should not be loose with their language. I said that in my column. He was loose in his language. That's why he got caught. The denial doesn't work for those who listen to him. Because it's in YouTube, in clear, simple language. That's why.
I think, sometimes we who are actually, like both of us, Bono, we talk to people through this program. A lot of other opinion writers write their opinions, and not very many people read. But we have an obligation, likewise, to caution many of our officials, especially those in government, to be very careful with language. Because language ought to be simple enough that you have a subject and a predicate, and that's it.
That's right.
Do not. I remember when I was editing a daily paper. Remember how it was then? You were one of my columnists also.
Yes.
Diliman Way started also there in
the Philippine Chronicles.
Yes. And that's exactly what I was telling the reporters. Wag nang ang dami-daming palamuti at palabok yung mga hindi kasi maintindihan na. Do not add adjectives and adverbs, because when you're doing reportage, just give me the subject and the predicate, and that's it. But what's happening is many officials of our government, and this is not only the present government, but that is something that has happened time and time again. They try to be articulate, or they try to be eloquent, but they confuse more. And that's precisely why you were saying that you have the chief of staff who's now trying to correct what he said. But as he said, loose words sometimes get misinterpreted, and definitely he was misinterpreted in many ways. So kailangan talaga mag-ingat. Kasi for example, merong isang cabinet member, ang mga gamit niyang mga salita, ang hirap din. I have to do some research. When a cabinet member says something, which I listened to, as you said, pinakinggan, we are now doing a high-frequency monitoring system for this. Yung alam ko ng high-frequency, yan yung mga radyong gamit natin noon, VHF, etc. Pero pag sinabi ng isang cabinet officials, a high-frequency monitoring system, hindi ko alam kung konektado ito sa mga radyo or konektado, because this has something to do with the prices of commodities. This has something to do with what you buy in the grocery and what you buy in the market. Or, so pag sinabing high frequency monitoring, minomonitor ba yung presyo ng mga canned goods with what kind of high frequency monitoring? So even that, as they use words, or they describe certain things that they're supposed to be doing in their department na mahirap maintindihan. As you said, there's nothing like just having a subject and a predicate, and that's it. Kaya ang dami-daming naguguluhan, even in social networking. Ang sarap magdadaldal. Pero pag minsan yung kinikwento mo, malayo na sa katotohanan.
That's true. As a matter of fact, someone was commenting who's a friend. No? Uh, are you talking about Section 1, Article 3 of the Constitution? I said, no. I'm talking about Section 1, Article 2. Because Section 1, Article 3 is the due process and equal protection clause. And it has nothing to do with this.
Yes, exactly. That's the reason why we confuse ourselves. That's the ugly part of the way our language is being treated.
Right.
He said we should have a national language. We should just adopt the international language, which is English.
I agree.
We have millions of overseas workers who need English when they communicate with their employers. When we have documents that we have to fill up, they're in English because when they're written in Filipino, when you go to the provinces and it's translated in the language of the place, ang hirap din. Just this morning, there was a debate going on kasi dun sa isang form nakalagay domicile. Dun sa isang form nakalagay residence. So here you have a senator debating with another senator. Iba yan. Iba yung domicile, iba yung resident. Sabi naman ng isa, pareho din yan. Kasi kung siya nakatira, doon yon. No. So can you imagine how it is? Even in the forms, iba ang lengguwahe. So that's the problem. And then you have, for instance, like we are being told, like you and I, Bono, remember when we were in the radio program, sometimes we're being cautioned, magtagalog naman kayo. Pag ikaw in town, murag di tayo taga Mindanao, kay makasulti ng kita ng Bisaya, nga naman kay, you know how it is.
I say that's my problem.
We have to translate again from
Right.
Bisaya to Tagalog to English. Now, here's the problem we have, even for those who use Filipino. Because Tagalog is supposed to be mga taga-Ilog. This is the Central Luzon or the Manila area. But when you say Filipino as a national language, look how it has been bastardized. They have conjugated English. They conjugate English.
Yeah.
Mapetable yan. Ibabackpack ko yan. You know? You have the English word which is conjugated to fit into the Filipino language. My goodness, Bono, what is this?
That's right.
So anyway, so that is where that's the bad and the ugly of it. So let's see how we could really straighten this out.
Yeah.
If it is Filipino, then use Filipino exhaustively. And do not conjugate the English word and then let it fit in. And even the Filipino itself, the Tagalog word itself, I don't understand why you can say, sa mga pulis, ganito ang kanilang ginagawa. No, they will say, sa kapulisan. Police becomes pulisan. You know, it was never used before. That was not what we learned. Okay. Now you go now to a review. This is also an attention to the DepEd. When you study the curricula or the syllable, whatever you call it, for the elementary level, for instance, maybe you should do some revisions because you have this, sa wikang Pilipino, pantig, etc. Ang dami-daming salita na hindi mo na ginagamit ngayon. There are so many conjugation of Tagalog that you do not use anymore. So maybe that should be revised to make it simpler for the students to really understand pure Filipino if it has to be that way.
The good is coming, Rita. Even on the level of language, it's coming.
You know, sometimes, sabi nga, she throws her words around like poetry, hoping that wherever they fall, it would somehow bloom. we hope for this, you know. Yeah. Going back to so many things that we are sometimes confused is, let's get away with what is ugly now. The garbage being thrown in the street, pangit yan tingnan. Yung basura, pangit tingnan. Yung mga dalagita na nagbibihis na halos wala nang kapirasong damit na lang, pangit yan. You know? Pag titingnan nila, oh, that's fashionable. That's the fashion now. Is it beautiful? Is it good? Pangit.
No,
Because you attract attention not to the clothing you're wearing, but to portions of your body which should not be exposed. Di
I
ba?
remember very well. I remember the cabinet, the previous administration has his denim pants and rugs. Sabi ko, my God, what's happening here? Sabi, sir, that's style.
Oh, uso ngayon.
That,
Binubutasan nila yung denim. Yeah.
that's the
Levi,
that's
Mr.
the
Levi
fad.
must be turning in his grave. I mean, he's already a classic Levi pants, hindi ba maong? Ngayon, bubutasan na yan for you to be able to.
Somebody was telling me, if you want, if you can recognize a woman at a distance, it's easy. Long hair and pick shorts. Pick shorts. If you want to
You
recognize
see,
a
even the
man,
way it's called, it's already so
if you
scandalous. Yeah.
recognize a man from a distance, also long hair, but with long pants.
But there is an addendum to that. Sometimes that which you recognize is neither male nor female.
I know. I
So
know.
here is Bono and I. Those of you who are listening to us or watching us, pardon the fact that we belong to really a past era. And the reason why we talk like this is perhaps to bring you back to a certain time in our contemporary history where things were really so different. That was when you could really see what was true, good, and beautiful, as Mrs. Marcos would say it.
That's why.
Yeah, the women had long skirts.
One time, I was riding in one of the main streets here in Quezon City. At the distance, said, that's a man. In 3 meters away, turns out to be, you know what?
Yes.
sabi ng kapasahero ko, sir, mali ka.
Lain man, even well, I don't know how this goes, that at a certain age your children will be asked what gender they would want to be when they grow up.
Ay, nako.
Oh dear. Anyway,
that's why I am against same-sex marriage. Whatever they say.
It shouldn't be a marriage. It should be a civil union. They could
Yeah.
formalize this into some legal document.
Yeah.
Because the problem only with that is the separation of properties.
They cannot be partnership.
Yeah, exactly. You're not dividing your heart.
Oh.
You're not dividing your physique. You're dividing properties. So just enter into some kind of a civil arrangement.
Yeah, partnership.
Because marriage is man and woman.
Yeah, correct.
That's all it is. It's as simple as that. But if you want to have a partner for life which is the same gender as you, then just enter into a simple civil relationship, a civil bond or whatever you would call it, so that you could have something legal and the separation would not be so messy. Oh,
Right.
so much to talk about. We have not even touched the ugly and the bad. We have a high rate of suicide. We have a high rate of teenage pregnancies. We have a high rate of changing of genders, whether for the better or for the worse. We have a high rate of exposure in media which should not be exposed.
Correct.
We have a high rate in social networking, which also should it be controlled, or is it part of the deliverance of free speech? And then, of course, we should have other laws that will have to be amended. You yourself had said that petty crimes, etc., should have shorter hearings, and that we should decongest our prisons by precisely having a term period how fast certain cases could be decided. Ang dami. Congested prisons are all because of tagal. Ang tagal bago magkaroon ng hearing. Anyway, the bad, the ugly. Now let's close our program, Bono, with what good there would be in spite of all of this, in spite of the war in the Middle East, in Ukraine, in many places of our country, in spite of the harassment our fishermen are getting when they try to fish, in spite of the harassment of the Coast Guard when they try to bring food to whatever else we have out there and all of this. So in spite of all of that, some good will come out of this after all. We will reach that horizon, new or otherwise.
Rita, I'm a perennial romanticist. So I'll quote Ralph Waldo Emerson. Not gold, but only man can make a people great and strong. Men who for truth and honor's sake stand fast and suffer long. Brave men who work while others sleep, who dare while others fly. They built a nation's pillars deep and left them to the sky.
Beautiful. Well, now that you're quoting poetry, I can only quote from my own epic poetry.
Good.
Patriots, I call on all who answer to the honor of that name. And so with that, I'd like to thank you, Bono, for having joined us.
It's a pleasure, Rita. Thank you.
Before we go, do we have, let's just look if we have some comments coming in there. Do we see this anywhere? Anyway, so we are heard nationwide, and we are also seen chat anyway. So better to discuss things, to argue and engage in polemics than make pernicious plans of mutual destruction. That's a quote from Mikhail Gorbachev. Thank you for exposing the beauty and the ugliness of geopolitics. Gorbachev, he was the last of the Russian leaders that I met, but I was not able to interview him. But I interviewed his wife, Raisa Gorbachev. Anyway, happy ako to see and hear from you, good people, Ma'am Rita and Attorney ADAZA. Okay, we have also people watching in the Netherlands and several countries abroad. Thank you very much to all of this. Thank you, Bono, for having joined us.
Thank you too, and God bless to all of us.
Yes, thank you very much. This has been The Chronicles, and this is your host, Rita Gadi.